Hello, saludos a todos. This is State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli. Welcome to our conversation as we celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. And I'm very pleased to have an extraordinary person, Gerson Borrero, who I'm going to tell you a little bit about in a moment. For the one or two folks out there that haven't heard of Gerson, he's certainly well known in New York City and in New York State. But we're doing this conversation in recognition of this being Hispanic Heritage Month and celebrating the many contributions of the Hispanic community to New York City, to New York State, to the United States of America. The Hispanic population, the Latino population, has been a very vital component of our community forever. Some interesting statistics. New Yorkers of Hispanic descent make up about 20% of our state's population. In New York City, the number is just shy of 30%. Just under a third of the immigrants in our state are of Hispanic descent, about 1.5 million people. And just under 3 million are of working age, with a 64.9% labor force participation rate here. 1.9 million of that number is actually in New York City. So state numbers, New York City numbers as well. What this means is that Hispanic families and individuals are such a key component of what New York is all about, and that's certainly what we celebrate during Hispanic Heritage Month. So I said I have a special guest, and that's Gerson Borrero. He's here to talk to me about what Hispanic Heritage Month, or Hispanic Heritage every month, means to him, talk about some of the current issues that are out there. As I said, this is someone who's very well known. It's been a privilege for me to get to know him over the years. He's a friend. He could be a challenging friend, I might add, and that's why I'm looking forward to this conversation.
An acquired taste.
And no, never an acquired taste.
Yes.
Never.
Yes.
But as I said, for the few of you who may not be familiar with Gerson, he is a longtime and well-respected journalist, radio host, TV political commentator. He's a great follow on Twitter, or X, I guess we call it now, for those of you that follow that.
I'll call it Twitter just to bug Elon Musk.
And you can find him at Gerson Borrero. He's been a political commentator, and it's a long list of accomplishments. So, but just to remind everybody, for Spectrum News New York 1, for 20 years, he has appeared on a weekly segment as part of the program Inside City Hall. For the past 9 years, he's appeared on Spectrum's Spanish language New York 1 Noticias, where he offers commentary on breaking news and current events with a weekly segment known as Para que lo sepas. How did I do?
That's pretty good.
Close? With a little bit of an Italian accent?
That's that.
You'll say
You're
it the
better
right
than
way.
Frank Perdue.
He's also worked at City and State New York in various capacities, including editor-at-large, served on City and State New York's editorial board as a columnist, editor-in-chief of El Diario. It's a long list. In 2008, he spearheaded coverage of the Democratic and Republican presidential conventions for Hispanic Information and Telecommunications Network, where he currently serves as political editor and host of Estudio DC. For over 2 decades, he's been a radio broadcaster. The list goes on, and he has a wonderful wife, Ruth Colon, who's a great success in her own right. And it's been a privilege to get to know Ruth and Gerson, as I said. Gerson, welcome. A lot to cover in a short time, but let's start maybe with a little bit more about you that I didn't touch on beyond your great career. You were born in Ponce in Puerto Rico?
Yes, I was. That's on the south part of the island.
And so you came here, I think you're about 4 years old. Tell us about your origins, what brought you from Puerto Rico to New York.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. They should re-examine your staff, who your criteria is for inviting on this program, but I appreciate it. I came here it's kind of strange. My father and uncle were born in Harlem Hospital. So my grandfather and grandmother on the paternal side actually were in New York in the early 20s. They traveled here by boat. There were boats that came here from the Caguas to the Ponce to the Marine Tiger. You can look that up. It's all archived here. If you go to the Centro for Estudio Puertorriqueños at Hunter College, at its house. My mother, of course, married my father, Manuel Borrero, my mother, Noelia Maldonado Rivera, from Ponce, La Playa de Ponce, which is really on the beach side. We're playeros de Ponce. She, at the marriage didn't last long. So by the time I was 4.5 years old, my mother had decided to come to New York, to migrate to New York. We are Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens, so we don't have that problem. We get on a plane and we're over here, La Guagua Aérea, which is the Airbuses, as we call it. So in those days, it was 8-9 hours the flight. Trans-Caribbean was like a famous airline, Eastern. So it wound up that she came here looking, a divorced woman in Puerto Rico in the early 1950s. I was born in 1950. And those days, a divorced woman, it was like carrying a stamp on her forehead. It was frowned upon. Puerto Rico is mainly a very Christian island nation, but it's mainly Catholic. So you can imagine that wasn't looked upon as, oh, I got a divorced woman. So she decided, I got to look elsewhere. She was here for around 8 months. She sent for my brother, who was Victor, a year younger than I am, 1.5 years younger than I am, he's deceased now. And it wound up that she ventured into New York, lived in a furnished room on the west side. So the first thing I saw was actually Central Park and in snow. There's pictures of me. I was so cute as a child, but it wound up, I don't know what happened to me later, but it wound up that we went to the west side, and from there she worked. I always saw my mother working as a single woman, with my grandmother being at home all the time. And from there we moved to the Bronx. Within around a year, she had accumulated enough money. She's a single woman in those days, which wasn't very popular here either. So my mother was a pioneer. It was difficult. It was hard. But I wouldn't do it any other way.
Yeah.
She was very, I learned so many things from her. So from her, as an example that I saw of a hardworking person, I never saw, there's nothing wrong with accepting, benefits, welfare, anything, but my mother worked. She sold Avon products, she sold also, what was it? Stanley products.
Stanley.
And she would do that to supplement her income.
My mother used to buy both.
And my mother, we had friends in the neighborhood, and that's how she supplemented her income, so that we would be economically independent as you can be. We wound up moving to the Bronx, 576 Fox Street. I still remember. My brain is not gone yet, but it's still, So it wound up vivid memories because I didn't know where we were.
Yeah.
And I wound up going to PS 62. I wound up hearing the word "spick" for the first time, having fights every day because I wouldn't stay hit or pushed around. My brother never had fights. It was always me. I was the one getting into trouble. Couldn't get my mouth shut. It was an interesting life. My mother showed me characters. As you grow older, you realize what your parents do for you. At least some of us do.
We don't fully appreciate it when we're younger. I say that all the time.
That's my mindset of having. I've never known anything but work. I'm still working because people still give me jobs. Yeah. And I don't know. So my wife tells me, she's younger than I am, and you know her, and she says, when are you? And she's already given up. I'm not going to retire until when they stop calling or giving me a job. So anyway, so it's like, it's interesting because it was a different time, different city, different attitudes. But
there's also a time when you had a huge influx of
Puerto Ricans.
Families moving from Puerto Rico to New York.
Yes, families, because this is where you went. People like my mother.
American story,
yes.
Right?
And it's always been, New York City has always welcomed people. But it's not easy. It's not easy for anyone. Right, it's not expected to be easy. Right. Immigrants from New York as it is, this is how the city was built. Its character
continues to be.
Comes from people who want to come here, and it's there. It's laden, you can see it if you go through the history of it. So we just worked hard, got as much education as I could. I was really tough because it was rough going to school, public school. Yeah. And I wound up going to Puerto Rico. My mother couldn't control me. They tried. And, getting your ass kicked outside, and then you go home. My grandmother was the type, God bless her, Mami Julia. if come in from assembly, which you wear a white shirt, but it's a red tie. I'm from those days. And it wound up that, oh, you were fighting again, smack. Those days you could smack kids, It didn't hurt me. I'm still here. It didn't kill me. I'm not encouraging anyone to do it. But it wound up that, all of these things, Tom, it sort of makes you, and it gives me an appreciation for what's going on today.
Yeah.
And people wanting a better life.
Well, and I want to talk about that. And also in the context of when we talk about the Hispanic Latino population in New York, I suspect when you were growing up in the 50s, the dominant group were Puerto Ricans,
yes,
right?
That was the only group, yeah.
Now, and then for a period of time, the big influx of Dominicans. But now, how many different countries from Central America, South America, in addition to Puerto Rican families, which, as you point out, are American citizens, and obviously a strong Dominican community, the diversity within the Hispanic community, you've witnessed it. What's been that dynamic, and how do you view it?
Well, by the way, it's interesting, and I say this and not particularly targeted at you because the term Hispanic is something that was, Madison Avenue couldn't deal with at the 80s. So I particularly, this thing of Hispanic, I'm not anybody's panic. And to me, I don't use the term. I know people use it, except the thing. I also don't like the term Latino or Latinx and all that. I'm Puerto Rican. Dominicans are Dominicans. Colombians are Colombians. Cubans are Cubans. Panamanians are Panamanians. But I think it's an easy way for people to be able to deal with us. With so many of us from different countries, we may have, language, even Mexicans. But in Mexico, there's indigenous languages.
Yeah.
And people just don't understand. It's offensive. Peruvians have indigenous languages also. So it's an interesting, what I'm seeing now is that there's a misunderstanding, misconception that has been pushed in part, not by politicians, but by Madison Avenue, Madison Avenue being the people that have to sell everything and they have to maneuver. And in those days, that's the way. So they came up with the term Hispanic too. Not that it doesn't, it's Hispanos, it's okay. I particularly don't like it. And I don't like to be put in a category of, Latino. I'm Puerto Rican. I respect Dominicans, Mexicans, I embrace them. So that kind of thing. But listen, there are greater problems that we have right now.
Well, and how do you reflect on those problems now? Obviously, the migrant issue has been front and center, obviously. And we saw recently the work permits for the Venezuelans, particularly. But you follow what's going on, you read the papers, you hear the rhetoric. Wow, what a challenging time for those families to be migrating here, given all the noise. How do you, given your history, how do you view it?
Well, I cannot really address that, but I'm beginning to listen to people that have to go through the process of coming into the, into this country, wherever it is legally, whatever legally means, right? And it winds up understanding that Puerto Ricans we don't understand that.
Yeah.
We get on a plane, to be quite honest, sometimes I wonder why we are so protective and we are outraged that at how they're treated. There was a congressman who from Chicago's 4th district that wound up being very Luis Gutierrez, by the way, New Yorker. Oh. And he was a really strong voice for migrants and immigrants and everyone. But the point is that I think that we just have, afraid. I think what's happening in the nation, to me, it's all about race, whites losing. I can't understand how people fear change. We're not going to hurt anyone. We didn't come here to hurt anyone. I can't speak on behalf of everyone. There's all kinds of people that have, from other nationalities came here and they found a way through gangs or through organized.
A lot of them face some of the same challenges.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
The Italians didn't have it easy in the beginning.
Exactly.
They were names. And names called.
And there were good people, bad people, and everything.
Sure.
I think that they have to, but I saw people come here to work.
Yeah.
They don't come here, they don't know about the system, they're not used, that doesn't happen in their respective countries, wherever they're from. Venezuela is a case in point. I just find that we've become stupid as a city. If you go, there's a great Simón Bolívar, liberator from Venezuela. Most people don't know there's a statue in his honor in Central Park.
I didn't know that.
And on the west side. Simón Bolívar, over 250 years ago, the guy had a vision for liberating the Americas, Venezuelan. we've got to stop being dummies, educate ourselves, learn about people before we fear them. And once you educate, and not that, you can do this on your own. It's even easier now. But get some books.
Know the history.
Yeah, you have to. Tiene que matar la ignorancia. You got to kill ignorance. I really mean kill. You have to kill ignorance on your own. Start with yourself.
Yeah. Tell me that phrase again in Spanish.
Matar la ignorancia. You have a license. I used to use that on radio. Licencia para matar la ignorancia, which is a license to kill ignorance. If we can, and by the way, you don't have to apply anywhere for that.
Yeah.
You can just have it as part of your being.
Yeah.
And I think, Tom, that we have to, I'm sorry, Mr. Comptroller, but, I think it's interesting that we just fail to understand, one, our own history here in New York City, in the United States, and world history. And it's easy, even through religion. I mean, I see some of these religious zealots and these people, I said, what the hell are they talking? Where does this come from? So I think that, Venezuelans were known to New York City because of Simón Bolívar, who was praised by people who understand that he wanted to liberate the Americas. By the way, we didn't want to come here. So if you really took it, and then take our foreign policy, they talk, which is a mess. I'm not, the mayor, I think, has mishandled this. So has the governor, lackluster, both of them, and not leading, but it's not just Joe Biden. I think we're old enough to remember 2024 when George Bush was running for election and John Kerry was the candidate for.
2004. Yeah.
Right?
2004.
2004.
Yeah.
I said 2024?
Yeah, you're moving ahead.
Yeah, I'm this is me. I'm not completely, at my age, you can expect anything. Let me not drool if I do just what. But the fact is that there was a plan. And I got into this because I wrote a column in Spanish in El Diario. George Bush, a Republican, had a plan to solve this. Democrats opposed it. You know who was the leading Democrat that actually opposed it? Bob Menendez. He's in the news lately.
Oh, how
Bob
interesting.
Menendez.
Wow.
He opposed it. You can check it. You can fact check it.
Wow.
In January 2024, when, of course, it was intended. Bush wanted to do this for his own reelection purposes, and it winds up that the Democrats, this can't happen. He's taking the lead on this. So they put John Kerry. It was Bob Menendez, who's always had good side to him in fighting for the rights of him. He said, no, that plan it was not a flawed plan. It was not flawed.
Yeah.
It would have led something from Reagan, who actually did something to that. So we have a problem here. There's a national problem. It's a disaster. And then we go in to even screw it up even more. Venezuela decides to go its own path. I'm not a fan of Hugo Chavez. I wasn't a fan of his. I'm not a fan of Maduro's. But let them decide for themselves. We impose sanctions. This is one of the richest countries, and through our meddling in their internal politics, we wind up weakening the country, pushing them further to the left, so they have an economic disaster. Listen, just fine. You don't have to be on one side or the other, just on economics. So where are they going to go? Yeah. And if you created the problem, then I'm going to come to your house.
Yeah.
That's simple. I don't know if that explains, but I'm trying
interesting.
to, in the short time we have
perspective. Let's get back to Puerto Rico for a moment.
Sure.
So when you've been back many times, right?
All the time.
You interviewed me at least once or twice there.
And thank you. You did that. Which, for City and State.
Yeah, for City and State.
And when nobody's around, Tom thought there was going to be a full thing, and he came and sat. And I remember Nick Power there. We taped you were first on our podcast.
That's right.
You were the first guest, so thank you for that.
Yeah. And given everything Puerto Rico's been through, I mean, the weather events, the economy there, the debt issue, the federal intervention, how do you feel when you go back to Puerto Rico about where the island is at and where is it headed?
It saddens me because we've done it to ourselves, because of the glitter and the easy way of having a economic dependence on a nation that invaded us. And I don't blame the United States per se, but in 1898, we were part of the war booty from Spain. They beat the hell out of Spain. And we were the only ones that they came in and took over. They couldn't dominate Cuba. Do you know what I'm saying? So all this history,
Philippines.
It's painful. I know the history. So if you know the history, you sort of say, So I don't see them as being, they ruined. I mean the government, not the people. I have nothing against people here in the United States, but governments through governments and imposing. I mean, within 6 months, Tom, they impose English as the first language. and as the only language. In Puerto Rico, you can't go to a federal court and speak in Spanish. You have to know English. I know you didn't know that. So some people, this is, and we talk about impositions and how we're going. I'm not saying that it's wrong and it's our fault for allowing that, but it's a very uncomfortable situation. I think that eventually in this climate in the United States, unfortunate for this great nation, is the divisiveness, which I call it the Civil War never ended. They stopped shooting and killing more people than ever in any war that we've participated in. But the Civil War is ongoing, and we're seeing a different manifestation of it. The hatred is there. So I'm hoping that this kind of thing, we may sneak in and, if we came to a vote right now in Congress, which Congress is the one that can decide, they would decide. If it was majority Republican, I think they kick us out when they realize, wow, we subsidize them by billions of dollars. And that's true. And we do, and we were producing things, the Jones Act, please check into this. Those of you that are interested in this, the Jones Act prohibits us from actually negotiating or doing commerce with any other country. The port is in Jacksonville. We export, some of the product we export, Tom, and check this out for people that are listening to us. We export things into the United States to be imported again and surcharge for us. That's, check the Jones Act. And Jacksonville, Florida, and it's all tied into what? Nothing against organized labor, but it's controlled by labor unions. So it's a very complex issue. So my personal feeling is that we resolve this by Congress taking their rightful place. I believe in independence. There are models. Israel, we have a good relationship to have independent nations do commerce and let us develop ourselves. We're the only country in the small Antilles and the large Antilles that actually we couldn't liberate ourselves. Everybody else, we went into fight for Dominican Republic. There were soldiers. It's all historical. We went also to fight. We sent people and soldiers and generals into Cuba for its independence, and it wound up that it didn't work for us. We were at the bottom of the totem pole. So I'm not regretting it. It's just that we have to learn. We don't have, unfortunately, the leaders, and I say that without exception, that can take that kind of determination to become an island nation, that we could be partners, but it's a very uncomfortable feeling.
Are you hopeful though? Is it getting better there on the ground?
No. We have there right now. I think there's 44 billion, and people can write to you and correct. I'm not a numbers guy. You are. $44 billion that have been frozen. Not all of it been given away. Among the stupidest things that Donald Trump said was, of course, but it makes sense now, Puerto Rico is an island surrounded by water. The fact is that we have water, we have air, and we still dependent on electricity. We have not developed a new, to be able to have the sun do its thing with winds and solar. So there's, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's $19 billion to be able to do this. We haven't done it, even after Maria, that showed, Hurricane Maria, which was horrible for destroying. The island has not recuperated from that. We have right now elections coming up like 2024. They're not easier in Puerto Rico, with people playing the game of, if you elect me, I'll make sure that Puerto Rico gets statehood, or those that say, we're going to get independence. That's not going to happen. The only people that can decide, whatever composition, whatever number the Congress is, will be the Congress of the United States. No president can do that. It will have to go back to Congress.
Back to Congress. Let's bring it back to New York. You've been an astute observer of the political scene for a long time. And I mentioned at the outset this significant part of the population that is of Hispanic, Latino, I won't go through all the countries, descent. But is it fair to observe that there's an underrepresentation in elective leadership of the Hispanic community when you look at who are in positions of power? And if that's the case, what's the remedy to that?
The remedy is more involvement. The remedy is to have leaders that actually know what building power is, to see what the Irish did, to see what the Italians did, what the Jews did. They were smart about it. We have a way of cannibalizing ourselves. I don't blame anyone for the exclusive. At one point, they were all Puerto Rican elected officials, right? And we grew. Then Dominicans have come in and Puerto Ricans have moved out to other parts of New York State, moved to Florida, retired, and elected officials. This is me as a Puerto Rican criticizing the Puerto Rican political structure who didn't have a bench. It's like they were playing for the Mets, who never have. No, I'm only kidding. I'm picking on the Mets fans. But the fact is that you have to develop a bench, and we didn't do that. It's like accumulating wealth. There is political wealth.
Yeah.
We never did that. There were Herman Badillos, there were Olga Mendez's, there was, by the way, Oscar Garcia Rivera, who actually was the first person, Puerto Rican, I think it was back 1927, 28, I'm going from memory, I'm not Googling this, he had to run as a Republican to get elected.
For Congress? Or
no,
what was he?
for the Assembly.
For the Assembly.
New York State Assembly. He was legislator. So we have that. At that time, Vito Marcantonio, Italiano.
A legendary guy.
Right,
yeah.
right. He was also a communist in those points. It was okay to be a communist. It had different connotations.
East Harlem, right?
East Harlem.
Yeah.
And El Barrio.
Yeah.
Puerto Ricans loved him.
Yeah.
There was a leader. So I'm saying that what we have no one to blame. And right now, we have Dominicans having occupied a lot of places, and we have also Colombians are beginning to get elected, but we have to make room. There's a lot of us multi-talented, very good. Some of them can turn out to be good officials. Nidia Velázquez has been in Congress for 31 years, first Puerto Rican woman elected to Congress, and she's 31 years now. But I don't think that we have been very smart about building. You don't make it in one generation. You don't make it, I was thinking back and remember Michael Dukakis and Reggie Jackson. It was the only time in this city's history, that all 11 elected officials, Puerto Ricans, endorsed one presidential candidate, and that was Jesse Jackson.
Jesse Jackson.
So it goes to pertaining of coalitions with blacks. We had that. And by the time, and there's a whole different story, because then the governor of Puerto Rico, Rafael Hernández Colón, wound up endorsing Michael Dukakis. They beat that family program. Okay, so that was a unit. They knew political strength.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, Tom, there is a lot of room for growth. If anyone blames that we've been excluded, it's been our own doing. Case in point, in 2021, Ruben Diaz Jr., Rubencito, had a great shot. And he pulled himself out.
Great guy. Served with him in the Assembly and did a great job as Bronx Borough President.
Despite his father. This is me saying it. It's not the controller. So,
but he's young enough to come back. Ruben could come back at some point.
I doubt it.
I
hear he's enjoying his life.
I know.
And
he looks great.
Young
he's enjoying
enough,
his family.
And his wife, and they're still young enough. And as a matter of fact, I saw him regarding in reference to Somos is coming up. There's a new one, Karine Reyes, Karine Reyes is now the chair of Somos, and she is Puerto Rican father, Dominican mother, raised more traditionally.
Unity right there.
Right, she married. So and it's the kind of thing that eventually, this is what people understand also. I'm off track on politics, but more important, to understand, when I was at El Diario, when I was editor-in-chief of El Diario, I used to ask, I had a newsroom, I had 51 people I was responsible for, and I had the Venezuelans, Colombians, Dominicans, Mexicans, and there was one time a Dominican woman married a Mexican guy. And I said, what are you going to call your children? What are they going to be? They said, well, the Mexicana, Dominicana, and Latino. So you know what they decided to do eventually that I saw? They would one summer, Dominican Republic, one summer, Mexico. And that happened with other people. All of that to say that Hispanic Heritage Month, or whatever it is we celebrate, I don't know about you, but yo soy Boricua all year long. I'm a Puerto Rican all year long. I don't change the stripes. It isn't one particular day. I try to understand who I am within the context of what this nation offers, what the city is so great, and I've seen it really down in the dumps with a lot of crime, with junkies all over, as we used to call them. But, I think that, and some people say, oh, the city's falling. It's not falling apart, but it's not headed in the right direction. I'm not directing this at Eric Adams. I'm just saying that the circumstances. And the fentanyl, people talk about, fentanyl is killing people. I used to see junkies, pushing. Let's take things in context. And if it's that bad with fentanyl, there's a way to clear this. So the problem,
that's the current wave, but it's not the first wave.
Aren't you sorry? I haven't let you talk.
No, you've been. This is about you. We're running out of time, but of course I want to go on a little longer, and I will anyway. Now, What was that phrase? I'm forgetting it. When you were always trying to give the new inside scoop.
Bochinche.
Do you have any bochinche for us?
But do I have any bochinche? I don't want to get you in trouble. I mean, this isn't like I'm in an office and you're the state controller, and you know. But well, I'll tell you the one bochinche, and I've spoken to our controller. Now I'm gonna, behind the scenes. I've always wondered why he didn't run for governor. See, now I want to get him in trouble.
Now
That's a bochinche.
Why
has Tom DiNapoli, who has gotten more votes? Don't edit this. Don't you edit this out. Why hasn't he run for governor? And you know why? Because this is what New York needs. He's too smart to go and play that game of political things. See, you asked for bochinche. Now
when I come back on your show, answer that. It's been a great conversation. And,
well, I don't know about that, Tom.
No, and I appreciate your, sharing your personal story of your beginnings, and whatever the right label or the right title is, the pride that you bring, your family's history, your family's success, right? When you came here as a little kid with that single mother, you didn't know where it was all going to lead to, right?
I still don't.
Yeah.
I still don't know what I'm going to do. So people ask me, I never had a plan. I'm blessed. God has been very generous with me.
But being in journalism and all the different iterations of your career, knowledge is so important. Understanding history, but even understanding current affairs. And we need more journalists who are responsible, aren't afraid to call it like it is, to be challenging when appropriate, right? You've asked me challenging questions when
and you still talking to me.
And I still talk to you. But what an important avocation you've had. And it's not just been a job. It's really been your avocation, your passion, and you're still going strong.
Let me just say thank you for those words. I would just quickly want to go back to take you to Playa de Ponce. When my mother couldn't handle me here, I went with my paternal grandmother, Mama Fana, Abuela Fana. I learned something from her. I didn't learn in journalism. You listen, and what you listen, what you hear that is inappropriate to repeat, take it with you to the grave. And this is how it happened. I used to get out of school at 2 o'clock, public school, head on home. She had ladies, 5 to 7 ladies that would come in for café a las 3. We Puerto Ricans at 3 o'clock, we stop and have coffee. She would gather them around. And those days, she had a machine in which you put the beans in, and I would sit around and grind. All I wanted to do, I took extra time because I wanted to hear the bochinche.
Yeah.
That's
where you got the bochinche.
That's where the bochinche I got it from. When these ladies, and she had all kinds of ladies, and it was like such a dynamic. I learned so much from these wise women.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I learned to listen. Some of it I take to my grave, but I've made a living talking about it sometimes.
I love it. What a great way to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month with a very important Hispanic New Yorker, if you don't mind me using that title.
No,
and
you
we'll
can
say
use
a very proud Puerto Rican New Yorker.
And you're not doing so bad yourself as an Italiano.
Not too bad, right? I have something to give you. I don't read all the whereases, but as we celebrate in 2023 Hispanic Heritage Month, it's been an honor to have you as my guest to talk about the issues of the day related to the Hispanic and Latino community here in New York, and your personal Puerto Rican story of great success. And I guess a small way for me to also appreciate knowing you all these years. It's really been a delight and an honor. You're a unique personality in New York, and please don't ever change.
I think at this point, it's going to be hard to do that. Yeah, I won't recognize myself. Thank you, Tom.
Gerson Borrero, this is for you.
Thank you so much.
A small way for us to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you for watching our discussion and celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month.